Hi, I'm Maya. At my wedding reception, I watched my sister and fiancé exchange a look, then slip something into my slice of cake like I wouldn't notice. I smiled, switched our plates when she turned away, watched her take that first bite. 20 minutes later, she collapsed at the altar during our vow renewal ceremony, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow. They thought I was oblivious, but they had no idea I already knew about the deleted texts, the secret meetings, their plan to leave me humiliated and alone after they'd taken everything I'd built. Before we dive in, what time are you watching? This, and from where? Drop a comment below. This story gets dark. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you! The string quartet's final note hung in the air of the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers catching every shimmer of candlelight, as 200 guests turned toward the 5-tier wedding cake being wheeled in on a gold cart. Pure white fondant, cascaded like fabric, each tier adorned with sugar peonies that looked so real, you'd swear they'd been plucked from a garden seconds ago. The cake knife, an heirloom passed down 3 generations in my family, gleamed under the spotlight as Elliot, my husband of exactly 6 hours, reached for my hand. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. I nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was beautiful. Everything was. The venue, an historic château overlooking Lake Geneva, had been my dream since childhood. The flowers, arrangements of white ranunculus and pale pink garden roses, filled the space with a scent so sweet it almost masked the sourness I'd been tasting at the back of my throat since I'd seen that text message 3 weeks ago. "Let's get a picture, Maya," called Isabel, my sister and maid of honor, her champagne flute raised high, her burgundy dress shifting like wine as she moved toward us. Perfect Isabel. Brilliant Isabel. The sister who had spent her entire life competing with me for everything, grades, attention, boys, and who now apparently wanted my husband too. I stepped forward, smoothing the silk of my wedding gown. The cake-cutting ceremony felt like an out-of-body experience, Elliot's hand over mine as we sliced through the bottom tier. Guests cheered, phones flashed, and I kept smiling, the same. Practiced smile I'd been wearing since finding Elliot's unlocked phone on our bathroom counter, a half-typed message to Isabel glowing on the screen. "After the cake, meet me at the gazebo. By tomorrow, she'll never—" The message cut off. There, he'd never finished it. But I'd found enough over the following weeks to piece together what came next. "First slice for the bride," announced the catering manager, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair who handed me a plate with a generous piece of the vanilla lavender cake I'd selected months ago. I accepted it with a nod, watching as she served Elliot next, then Isabel. That's when I saw it. The brief exchange, Elliot's slight nod, Isabel's casual approach, the way her manicured fingers hovered near my plate as she pretended to adjust. A napkin. Something small, white, powdery dropped into the frosting on the edge of my cake, dissolving almost instantly. I didn't gasp. I didn't flinch. I had prepared for this moment, suspected something might happen. Not this exactly. I'd thought perhaps they'd announce their affair publicly, humiliate me before everyone we knew. But this was darker than I'd imagined. Keeping my expression neutral, I turned toward my mother who was calling my name from the front row of tables. As I pivoted, I carefully, deliberately set my plate down next to Isabel's on the cake table. When I turned back, I picked up the other plate, hers, with a smile that felt like broken glass against my lips. "Aren't you going to try it?" Isabel asked, her voice honey-sweet, eyes fixed on my plate, the one she thought was mine. "You spent so much time selecting the flavor." "Of course," I replied, lifting the fork to my lips but not taking a bite. Pretending to chew, I nodded appreciatively. "Perfect." Elliot kissed my cheek, his lips cold against my skin, "Just like you," he murmured, and I wondered how I'd ever found his performance convincing. Isabel took a large bite of her cake, my drugged slice, and smiled, though I noticed a flicker of confusion cross her face. Perhaps it tasted off. She took another bite anyway, then a third, finishing nearly half the slice before setting it down. "We should prepare for the vow renewal," Elliot said, checking his watch. This had been his idea. A symbolic second ceremony at sunset, an intimate vow renewal at the property's historic stone chapel. Just family and the wedding party, he'd suggested. Something special and private after the main reception. Now I understood why. The chapel stood at the edge of the property, a 17th-century stone building with stained glass windows that caught the setting sun in fractures of ruby and sapphire light. I walked slowly down the aisle again, this time without the traditional wedding march, just the gentle babble of our closest family members finding their seats in the ancient wooden pews. Isabel stood beside the altar, looking paler than she had 20 minutes ago. Her fingers kept touching her temple, her breathing slightly labored. Our parents didn't notice, too busy adjusting their positions for more photos. "Are you all right?" I whispered as I took my place opposite Elliot. "Fine," she hissed, though her eyes couldn't seem to focus properly. "Just a headache." The officiant, an old family friend who'd agreed to this symbolic second ceremony, began speaking about the sanctity of vows and the meaning of forever. I barely heard him. I was watching Isabel, whose composure was cracking by the second. Her perfect posture slumped slightly. A bead of sweat traced her hairline despite the chapel's cool interior. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elliot was watching her too, I noticed. His attention kept sliding from me to her, concern, gradually replacing the confident smile he'd worn all day. "Maya and Elliot have prepared personal vows for this intimate ceremony," the officiant announced, nodding toward me to begin. I took a deep breath, unfolding the paper I'd rewritten just hours ago. These weren't the vows I'd planned for months. "Elliot," I began, my voice steady. "Today I stand before our closest family and friends to make promises that should last a lifetime." I paused, letting my eyes meet his. Promises of honesty, fidelity, and trust. His smile faltered slightly. Behind him, Isabel swayed on, her feet. "But vows are only as strong as the people who make them," I continued. "And some people make promises they never intend to keep." A confused murmur rippled through the small gathering. My mother shifted uncomfortably in the front row. "I promise today that I will always value truth above comfort. I promise I will never ignore evidence when it's staring me in the face." My voice grew stronger. "I promise I will always protect myself from those who wish me harm." Elliot's expression hardened, his jaw setting in a way I'd seen before during arguments he knew he was losing. "Maya," he whispered harshly, "what are you doing?" Before I could answer, there was a thud beside us. Isabel had collapsed, her body crumpling to the stone floor like a marionette with cut strings. Her breathing was shallow, face flushed, eyes struggling to stay open. "Izzy!" my mother screamed, rushing forward. "Call an ambulance!" someone shouted from the back. In the chaos that followed, only Elliot remained frozen, his eyes locked on mine in dawning comprehension. "What did you do?" he breathed. "Nothing," I replied calmly. "I just didn't eat what wasn't meant for me." The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights, paramedic questions, and hospital waiting rooms. My parents rode in the ambulance with Isabel while I insisted on driving separately. Elliot tried to ride with me, but I locked the car door before he could get in, leaving him stranded at the château to find his own way to the hospital. I didn't go directly to the emergency room. First, I drove to the small vacation cottage I'd rented 3 weeks ago under a different name, paid for in cash. Inside, I changed out of my wedding dress into jeans and a sweater, then retrieved the locked briefcase from under the bed. Inside was everything I'd been collecting since finding that unfinished text. Screenshots of conversations between Elliot and Isabel dating back 8 months. Bank statements showing unexplained transfers from our joint account to a new one opened in his name alone. A consultation receipt from a divorce attorney dated just 2 weeks after our engagement. And most damning of all, a life insurance policy. Elliot had taken out on me 6 months ago, with him as the sole beneficiary. I added one more item to the collection. A sealed evidence bag containing a sample of cake from my original slice, the one I'd slipped into my clutch during the confusion of Isabel's collapse. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Isabel had been stabilized. "Some kind of reaction," the doctor told my frantic parents. "We're running toxicology screens now." Elliot paced the waiting room, his wedding suit rumpled, tie loosened. When he saw me, relief washed over his face so convincingly that for a split second, I almost doubted what I knew. "Where were you?" he demanded, pulling me into an embrace I didn't return. "I was worried sick." "Were you?" I asked, my voice neutral. My mother approached, eyes red-rimmed. "They're keeping her overnight for observation. They said she'll be fine, but they don't know what caused it." "I think I might," I said quietly, and 3 heads turned toward me in unison. "What do you mean?" my father asked, speaking for the first time since I'd arrived. I took a breath. This was the moment I'd rehearsed in my mind for weeks, though I hadn't anticipated it happening in a hospital waiting room on my wedding night. "I need to speak with the doctor," I said, "and probably the police." Elliot's hand gripped my arm. "Maya, what are you talking about? You're not making any sense." I removed his hand from my arm, one finger at a time. "I saw Isabel put something in my cake. I switched our plates. Whatever she meant for me, she got instead." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face drained of color. And Elliot's expression shifted from confusion to anger to calculation in the span of seconds. "That's ridiculous," he finally said, forcing a laugh. "She's your sister. Why would she do something like that?" "Ask her yourself," I replied. "Or maybe I should ask you, since this whole plan seems to have been a joint effort." My mother stepped between us. "Maya, this is crazy. You're not thinking clearly. It's been a stressful day." "I have proof," I interrupted, "of everything." I didn't elaborate further, not yet. Let them wonder exactly what I knew, how much evidence I had collected. Uncertainty was my advantage now. A police officer approached us, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Harrington? I'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened at the chapel." I nodded, then looked directly at Elliot. "I'll tell them everything I know." The officer led me to a small consultation room off the main waiting area. As I followed, I glanced back once to see Elliot already on his phone, fingers flying across the screen, panic etched into every line of his face. I'd been preparing for this moment for 23 days, since 9:17 p.m. on April 3rd, when I'd picked up Elliot's phone to move it from the bathroom counter and seen a notification from Isabel flash across the screen. I hadn't been looking for anything. I wasn't the type to snoop. But there it was, 3 words that changed everything. She suspects nothing. That night, I'd lain awake beside him, listening to his even breathing, wondering what exactly I wasn't suspecting. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was wedding-related, perhaps a surprise honeymoon they were planning together. Isabel had always been close to Elliot. They shared the same profession, moved in the same circles. It made sense they might collaborate on a gift. But something felt off. The phrasing was too secretive, too conspiratorial. So I started paying attention. I noticed how Elliot's phone would go silent whenever I entered a room, how he began taking calls outside, claiming poor reception in our apartment. How Isabel suddenly had committee meetings every Thursday evening, the same evening Elliot claimed to have late client consultations. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I watched and waited. I installed a recovery program on our home computer, retrieving deleted browser history that showed searches for undetectable poisons, how to make a death look like natural causes, and inheritance laws for newlyweds. That's when I contacted Mira, my college roommate who now worked as a private investigator. She didn't ask questions when I explained I needed surveillance on my fiancé and sister. She just nodded and quoted her rate. The photos came 3 days later. Elliot and Isabel, at a cafe across town, hands entwined on the table. Elliot and Isabel entering a hotel at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Isabel leaving Elliot's office after hours, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. But the affair wasn't what chilled me to the bone. It was the additional information Mira uncovered. The life insurance policy, the offshore account, the consultations, with experts in bereavement law. This wasn't just about leaving me. This was about erasing me. Mrs. Harrington? The officer's voice pulled me back to the present. Can you tell me exactly what you saw at the reception? I recounted the events precisely, clinically, as if they had happened to someone else. The officer took notes, his expression carefully neutral. And you believe your sister intentionally drugged your cake? I know she did, I replied. I saw her do it, and I have a sample of the cake in my car that you can test. His eyebrows rose slightly. You kept a sample of the cake? I've been suspecting something might happen for weeks, I explained. I just didn't know what form it would take. He closed his notebook. This is a serious accusation against your sister and potentially your husband. Do you understand that? I met his gaze steadily. I understand that if I had eaten that cake instead of her, I might be the one hooked up to monitors right now, or worse. The officer left to retrieve the cake sample from my car, and I sat alone in the sterile consultation room, listening to the muted hospital sounds beyond the door. Somewhere down the hall, Isabel was recovering from whatever she had intended for me. Somewhere in the waiting room, Elliot was likely constructing a narrative to discredit me. Unstable bride, wedding day nerves, history of paranoia perhaps. What they didn't know was that I had planned for this too. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira. All files delivered as requested. Let me know if you need anything else. I allowed myself a small smile. While I'd been giving my statement to the police, Mira had been delivering copies of all the evidence I'd gathered to my parents, Elliot's parents, our close friends, and, most importantly, to Elliot's law firm partners. By morning, everyone would know exactly what kind of man had stood at the altar today and sworn to love and cherish me until death did us part. Death that, apparently, he'd been planning to expedite. The door opened, and a doctor entered alongside the police officer. Her expression was grave as she introduced herself as Dr. Lung, toxicologist. Mrs. Harrington, we've received preliminary results from your sister's blood work, she said. She had elevated levels of benzodiazepines in her system, specifically a compound called rohypnol, at a concentration that suggests intentional ingestion rather than therapeutic use. The officer added, "We've sent the cake sample to the lab for testing." Rohypnol, I repeated. The date rape drug. But I suspected this wasn't about assault. It was about incapacitation. Will she recover fully? Yes, Dr. Lung confirmed, though the dosage was concerning. Had she consumed the entire slice, or had she been drinking alcohol throughout the evening, the outcome could have been much more serious. I thought about the champagne toast scheduled after the chapel ceremony, the special vintage Elliot had insisted on serving just to the wedding party. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "One more thing," the officer said, studying me carefully. "Your husband is claiming that you've been experiencing paranoid episodes leading up to the wedding. He says you've made accusations like this before." And there it was, exactly as I'd predicted. The gaslighting had begun. "I have documentation proving otherwise," I replied calmly, "including a recording of a conversation between Elliot and Isabel from 3 days ago, discussing their plans for after I was out of the picture." The officer's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. "I'd like to see that documentation." "Of course," I said. "It's all in my briefcase." Along with the prenuptial agreement Elliot insisted on, which, interestingly, becomes void in the event of infidelity or criminal activity by either party. As the officer left to retrieve my briefcase from the car, Dr. Lung lingered. "Mrs. Harrington," she said quietly, "regardless of what happens with the investigation, you should know that your quick thinking likely prevented a medical emergency. If your sister had combined that dose with alcohol as planned—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I nodded my thanks and sat back in the chair, suddenly exhausted. My wedding day. This should have been the happiest day of my life, and instead, I was sitting in a hospital consultation room, giving evidence against my sister and new husband for what appeared to be an attempted poisoning. Through the small window in the door, I could see Elliot in the hallway, arguing with another officer. His gestures were becoming more animated, his carefully curated charm cracking under pressure. Beyond him, my parents sat huddled together on a bench, my mother weeping into my father's shoulder. I closed my eyes briefly, remembering the moment 3 weeks ago when everything had become clear, when suspicion had crystallized into certainty. I'd been sitting in our apartment surrounded by wedding RSVPs and sample menus when Mira called. "I've got the recordings from his office," she'd said without preamble. "You need to hear this now." I'd listened in growing horror to Elliot's voice, intimate and conspiratorial. Once we're married, the policy kicks in. If something happens within the first year, they investigate thoroughly. But if we wait 6 months, establish a happy marriage narrative, then it just becomes a tragic accident. You and I mourn appropriately, wait a respectable period, and then eventually find comfort in each other's arms. No one will question it. And Isabel, my sister, my maid of honor, the person who'd helped me choose my wedding dress, had laughed and replied, "Always the careful planner. But what if something happens at the wedding? Everyone's drinking, celebrating. Accidents happen all the time at events like these." A pause, then Elliot again. "That's too soon, but actually, what about the vow renewal at the chapel? Much smaller group, more controlled environment." "Perfect," Isabel had agreed. "I'll handle it. By sunset on your wedding day, you'll be a grieving widower instead of a newlywed husband." I'd sat frozen, Mira's voice asking repeatedly if I was okay, if I needed her to come over. When I finally found my voice, I asked only one question. "Can you get me copies of everything?" The 3 weeks that followed were a blur of secret preparations while maintaining a facade of bridal excitement. I consulted a lawyer specializing in criminal defense, secured a safety deposit box for originals of all evidence, and most difficult of all, continued to smile and play the role of eager bride-to-be. I never considered canceling the wedding. That would have only postponed whatever they were planning, driven it further underground. No, I needed to see it through, to catch them in the act, to gather evidence that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or cold feet. The door opened again, and the officer returned with my briefcase. "Mrs. Harrington, I've spoken with my sergeant. Based on the evidence you've provided and your sister's toxicology results, we're taking this very seriously. We'd like you to come to the station tomorrow morning to make a formal statement." I nodded. "And Elliot?" "We'll be questioning him tonight. He won't be allowed to contact you." Relief washed over me. Not happiness, not vindication, just simple relief that I would not have to spend my wedding night pretending, wondering if every drink, every touch, every moment of supposed intimacy might be my last. As I gathered my things to leave, my mother appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. "Is it true?" she whispered. "The things in those files Mira delivered?" I met her gaze. "Yes." She seemed to age before my eyes, shoulders slumping under an invisible weight. "Why? Why would Isabel do this to you? Why would Elliot?" "Money," I said simply. "My inheritance from grandmother, the life insurance. The company shares that vest next month." I paused. "And because they could. Because they thought I was too trusting, too naive to notice what was happening right in front of me." My mother reached for me, her arms encircling me in a hug that felt both foreign and familiar. We hadn't been close in years. She'd always favored Isabel, the daughter who resembled her more in both looks and temperament. But now she held me like she used to when I was small, before comparisons and competitions had created a chasm between us. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against my hair. "I should have seen it. I should have known." I didn't respond. There would be time for recriminations later, for examining all the ways our family dynamics had enabled this betrayal. For now, I just needed to leave this place, to find somewhere quiet to begin processing what my life would look like tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after. As I walked through the hospital corridor toward the exit, I passed the room where Isabel was recovering. The door was partially open, and through the gap, I could see her lying there, still in her burgundy bridesmaid dress, an IV dripping steadily into her arm. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. I paused, hand on the doorframe. She turned her head slowly, her gaze meeting mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Why?" I finally asked, the single word containing a universe of questions. Isabel's laugh was bitter, her voice raspy. "You always had everything so easy. The grades, the career, the perfect fiancé. I just wanted something for myself for once." "So, you decided to take my life?" She flinched, then rallied. "It wasn't supposed to be like that. It just evolved. Elliot approached me first, you know. Said he made a mistake proposing to you, that I was the one he really wanted." I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly bone-tired. "And the drugged cake? Was that his idea too?" Her eyes slid away from mine. "It was supposed to look like an allergic reaction. You'd have medical attention right there if needed. We just needed you. Incapacitated enough for the prenup to be invalid when he filed for divorce." The casual way she described it, like it was a slightly questionable business strategy rather than a plot against her own sister, made my stomach turn. "You miscalculated," I said quietly. "Both of you." I didn't wait for her response. There was nothing more to say. As I walked away, her voice followed me, weak but defiant. "You can't prove intent. It's my word against yours." I kept walking, each step taking me further from the life I'd thought I was building, and closer to an uncertain future I would have to construct from scratch. But one thing was certain. I was alive, aware, and 10 steps ahead of them both. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. Stars pricked the black velvet sky, indifferent to human dramas unfolding beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear music, perhaps from another wedding, another celebration unmarred by betrayal. I drove back to the small cottage, where I would spend what should have been my wedding night alone. Not the future I had planned, but infinitely preferable to the one Elliot and Isabel had designed for me. As I unlocked the door, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, then saw it was from Elliot's business partner, Thomas. "Just reviewed the files Mira sent. Firm's legal team is meeting tomorrow. Elliot's partnership under review. Call me when you can." One small victory in what would likely be a long war. I set the phone down and sank onto the cottage's small sofa, kicking off my shoes and allowing myself, for the first time all day, to feel the full weight of what had happened. I had gotten married and uncovered a murder plot on the same day. I had watched my sister collapse from a drug she had intended for me. I had gathered evidence against the two people I should have been able to trust most in the world. There were tears, finally, not for Elliot or Isabel, but for the life I had thought was mine, for the future I had planned so carefully, for the trust I had given so freely. I let them come, these tears, knowing they were part of the process, part of the healing that would eventually follow. Tomorrow would bring police statements, lawyers, family recriminations, and the beginning of whatever came next. But tonight, in this quiet cottage, I allowed myself to mourn what was lost while acknowledging what I had saved: myself, my future, my agency. They had underestimated me, assumed my kindness was weakness, my trust was blindness. But they had never bothered to look deeper, to recognize the steel beneath the silk, the watchfulness behind the warmth. That was their mistake, one they would never have the chance to make again. Morning arrived like an unwelcome guest, persistent light filtering through cottage curtains I hadn't bothered to close. For a moment, just one heartbeat, I forgot. Then reality crashed back. Yesterday I became a wife and a victim in the same breath. Today, I would become something else entirely, a witness. I rose from the sofa where I'd spent the night, my body protesting hours spent in one position. My wedding dress lay in a heap on the floor where I'd dropped it, a puddle of white, silk now creased and forgotten. I stepped over it on my way to the shower, not even glancing down. Some symbols aren't worth preserving. The police station was quiet for a Saturday morning. Officer Reynolds, who had taken my initial statement at the hospital, met me at the entrance, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Harrington," he began, then stopped himself. "Ms. Thorne," he corrected, using my maiden name without my having to ask. A small kindness I hadn't expected. "We have a private room ready. The detective assigned to your case is waiting." Detective Sarah Mendez was not what I expected. Petite with close-cropped silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, she reminded me of my graduate school advisor. A woman who had once told me that being underestimated was a strategic advantage I should learn to exploit. "You've had quite the 24 hours, she said after introductions. No sympathy in her tone, just acknowledgement. "Let's start from the beginning. Not yesterday, the real beginning. When did you first suspect your husband and sister were conspiring against you?" I took her through the timeline methodically. The text message I'd seen by accident, the pattern of secretive behavior, the evidence Mira had collected, the recordings. "I have everything documented," I concluded, sliding a USB drive across the table, including financial records showing Elliot had begun moving our joint assets into accounts only he could access. Detective Mendez made notes as I spoke, occasionally asking for clarification, but otherwise letting me talk uninterrupted. When I finished, she studied me with an intensity that would have been uncomfortable under different circumstances. Most people, upon discovering their fiancé was having an affair with their sister, would have canceled the wedding, she observed. Most people's fiancés aren't planning to kill them for insurance money. She conceded the point with a slight nod. "Tell me about the insurance policy." $3 million. Taken out 6 months ago, shortly after I received my inheritance from my grandmother's estate. I'm the primary breadwinner in our relationship. I corrected myself. I'm a biotech patent attorney. Elliot was, a junior partner at a smaller firm. The inheritance was substantial enough to change our financial situation significantly. And you believe this money was the motive? Money and my company shares. I founded a biomedical startup 5 years ago with 2 colleagues. We've been in the R&D phase, but we're going public next quarter. My shares will be worth considerably more then. Elliot has spent the last year trying to convince me to add him as a beneficiary. Detective Mendez made another note. The cake. Sample you provided is still being analyzed, but preliminary results confirm the presence of rohypnol, consistent with your sister's toxicology report. Have you questioned Elliot? We brought him in last night. He's claiming ignorance of any drugging attempt, suggesting your sister may have acted alone. She watched me carefully. He's also suggested you have a history of paranoid behavior and might have drugged the cake yourself as part of an elaborate setup. I had expected this, prepared for it, but the accusation still landed like a physical blow. The sheer audacity of it, to attempt to poison me, then accuse me of self-sabotage. Detective Mendez, I said, keeping my voice level. 3 weeks ago, I documented every aspect of my mental and physical health. I had my doctor perform a complete psychological evaluation. I underwent drug testing. I even had my attorney videotape a statement explaining what I suspected and why. All of this is time-stamped and witnessed. I knew they would try to discredit me. Something flickered in her eyes. Not quite approval, but acknowledgement of thorough preparation. Your sister is still in the hospital, she continued. We'll be questioning her this afternoon. Given the circumstances, we've stationed an officer outside her room, both for her protection and to ensure she doesn't leave. And Elliot? Released on his own recognizance, but we've confiscated his passport. We're executing a search warrant on your shared residence this morning. She paused. Is there anything specific we should be looking for? I considered the question carefully. Check his home office, third drawer of the filing cabinet, behind the tax returns. There's a false back. And look at the basement storage unit. There's a waterproof case behind the winter clothing bin. He thinks I don't know about either. Detective Mendez raised an eyebrow, but made the note without comment. One more thing, I added. The prenuptial agreement. Elliot insisted on it, ironically. There's a morality clause that renders it void in cases of criminal conduct by either party. You're already thinking about the divorce? She seemed surprised. I'm thinking about survival, I corrected. Financial, legal, and literal. My life didn't end yesterday, though that was their plan. I'm ensuring it continues on my terms. After 2 more hours of detailed questioning, I was free to go. Outside the police station, the day had brightened into the kind of perfect spring morning that wedding photographers dream about. Sunlight dappled the sidewalk through new green leaves, the air fresh from overnight rain. A day for beginnings, not endings. My phone, which I'd silenced during the interview, buzzed with accumulated notifications as I turned it back on. 27. Missed calls. 43 text messages. 6 voicemails. The news had spread. I ignored them all and called the one person I knew wouldn't bombard me with questions or platitudes. I've been waiting, Mira answered on the first ring. You okay? No, I said honestly. But I will be. Can we meet? Already on my way to you. That cottage you rented isn't secure enough. I've got a better place lined up. This was why I'd hired Mira 3 weeks ago. She didn't just gather evidence, she thought 3 steps ahead. Like me. What about my things at the apartment? Being handled. I've got 2 guys there now, coordinating with the police. They'll secure your personal items once the search is complete. A pause. You should know your story's starting to leak. Nothing specific yet, but bride's wedding day nightmare is trending locally. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course it was. 200 wedding guests had witnessed part of the drama unfold. Hospital staff had seen the aftermath. It was only a matter of time before details emerged. Mira, I need to get ahead of this. Already on it. I've reached out to Patricia Chen. My breath caught. Patricia Chen was an investigative journalist who had made her reputation exposing corporate fraud and corruption. She was thorough, ethical, and, most importantly, impossible to intimidate or buy off. You think that's wise? You want the truth out there, right? Your truth, not whatever spin Elliot and Isabel try to put on it. Patricia will do that. Mira's voice softened slightly. Trust me, Maya. Control the narrative or it will control you. She was right. Set it up, but not today. I need to see my parents first. My parents had returned to their hotel after the hospital drama last night. I hadn't spoken to them since my brief exchange with my mother in the hospital corridor. Now, standing outside their hotel room door, I hesitated, my knuckles an inch from the wood. What do you say to the people who raised you after their other daughter tried to drug you on your wedding day? Before I could knock, the door opened. My father stood there, looking a decade older than he had yesterday morning when he'd walked me down the aisle. The proud smile was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen on his face before. Shame. Maya, he whispered, voice breaking on just those two syllables. I stepped into his embrace, allowing myself to be enfolded in arms that had always represented safety. Over his shoulder, I saw my mother sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes red-rimmed and vacant. How could we not have seen it? My father murmured against my hair. How did we miss this? I had no answer that wouldn't wound them further. The truth was, they had always seen Isabel as the fragile one, the one who needed more attention, more protection, more of everything. They had believed in her manufactured vulnerabilities so completely that they'd never recognized the calculation behind them. And I, not wanting to compete for scraps of attention, had simply built my life elsewhere, becoming self-sufficient out of necessity rather than nature. It doesn't matter now, I said, pulling back to look at him. What matters is what happens. Next. My mother finally spoke, her voice thin. They're saying Isabel might be charged with attempted murder. That can't be right, Maya. She couldn't. Mom, I interrupted gently. I have recordings. I have evidence. This wasn't impulsive. They planned it for months. But why? She pleaded. You're sisters. You've always been close. Had we? I couldn't remember the last time Isabel and I had had a conversation that wasn't layered with competition or veiled criticism. The closeness my mother perceived had been an elaborate performance, one I'd participated in to keep the peace, to be the good daughter who didn't rock the family boat. The inheritance, my father said quietly, answering my mother's question. And Maya's company. It was about money. It's always about money. My mother shook her head in denial, but I saw the moment reality penetrated her protective maternal bubble. Her shoulders slumped and fresh tears spilled. I've spoken to the police, I told them, sitting on the edge of the bed. They're building a case. It's going to get worse before it gets better. There will be publicity, questions. People will take sides. Sides? My mother echoed. How can there be sides, if what you're saying is true? Some people will believe Elliot's version, I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. He's claiming I have mental health issues, that I fabricated evidence, that I'm persecuting him and Isabel out of jealousy. My father's expression hardened. That's absurd. It's calculated, I corrected. He's trying to create reasonable doubt. It's what I would do in his position. The lawyer in me could appreciate the strategy, even as the betrayed wife and sister recoiled from it. What do you need from us? My father asked after a moment. Such a simple question, but it nearly undid me. What did I need? What could possibly fill the chasm that had opened beneath my feet, swallowing the future I'd planned and the family I thought I had? I need you to believe me, I said finally. Without question, without hesitation. I need you to stand with me publicly, even when it means standing against Isabel. I need you to be my parents right now, not hers. The words hung in the air between us, a request I'd never made before. I had always been the self-sufficient daughter, the one who didn't need rescuing or special attention. Now, I was asking them to choose me, explicitly and without reservation. My father nodded immediately. Without question, he affirmed. My mother hesitated, torn between her daughters in a way she had never allowed herself to be before. Then, Slowly, she reached for my hand. "I believe you," she said, each word deliberate. "And I am so sorry I didn't see what was happening." It wasn't everything. It wasn't healing. But it was a beginning. I met Mira at a nondescript apartment building across town, far from the wedding venue and the cottage. The security guard nodded to her as we entered, suggesting this wasn't her first time using this particular bolt hole. "Corporate apartment," she explained as we rode the elevator to the 12th floor. "Belongs to a client who owes me a favor. No connection to you, Elliot, or your family. You'll be safe here until things settle." The apartment was impersonal, but comfortable. High-end furnishings without personality, the kind of place that featured in luxury rental brochures. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city skyline, though privacy screens filtered the light and prevented anyone from seeing in. "Your clothes and personal items will be delivered this evening," Mira continued, conducting a brief tour. "Kitchen stocked. Wi-Fi password is on the fridge. Building has 24-hour security and private parking." I set my bag down on the pristine white sofa. "Have you heard anything from the police search?" Mira's expression shifted subtly. "They found something in the basement. Not sure what yet, but they've expanded the search warrant to include Elliot's office downtown." My stomach tightened. Whatever they'd discovered must have been significant to justify the expanded search. "Patricia Chen can meet you tomorrow," she added. "I suggest you use today to rest and prepare. She'll want details, all of them." Rest seemed impossible, but I nodded anyway. "Any word on Isabel?" "Still in the hospital, but being discharged to police custody this afternoon. Her lawyer's already making noise about a setup." Of course she was. "Let me guess, she's claiming she was the real target?" Mira's slight smile held no humor. "Close. She's saying you drugged both slices and had developed a tolerance to the drug through previous use. Creative, but medically impossible with Rohypnol." They're coordinating their stories. Trying to, not very successfully. Mira pulled out her tablet and showed me a news article. "Elliot gave an interview this morning. Tearfully concerned husband routine. But he contradicted the story Isabel's lawyer is floating." I skimmed the article, noting how carefully Elliot had chosen his words. He expressed shock and confusion over the unfortunate events at our wedding, promised to stand by his wife during her treatment, and asked for privacy during this difficult time. No direct accusations, just carefully crafted implications about my mental state. "He's good," I admitted, "but we're better." "Damn right we are." Mira took the tablet back. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start punching holes in their narrative." After she left, I stood at the window watching the city below. People moved through their Saturday routines, oblivious to the fact that 12 floors above them, a woman's life had been shattered and was being painstakingly reassembled into something new and undefined. My phone buzzed again. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "I know what they did. I have proof they didn't show you. Meet me?" I stared at the message, suspicion immediately flaring. It could be a trap, Elliot or Isabel trying to lure me out of safety. It could be a reporter seeking an exclusive. It could be nothing but a scam targeting a woman whose trauma was becoming public knowledge. Or it could be legitimate. Someone who had seen something, knew something that could strengthen the case against them. I saved the number but didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Mira and Detective Mendez. Let them investigate first. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Another message from the same number. Check your wedding video. 17:32 timestamp, near the cake table. This was specific enough to catch my attention. The wedding had been professionally filmed, a small army of photographers and videographers capturing every moment for what was supposed to be a lifetime of anniversary reminiscences. The footage would now serve a very different purpose. I called. Detective Mendez. I've received a text from an unknown number. I explained. They're suggesting there's something on the wedding video at a specific timestamp. Have you collected the footage yet? We have, she confirmed. We've been reviewing it as potential evidence. What timestamp are they referring to? 1732, near the cake table. I heard keys clicking in the background. Give me a moment to pull it up. Yes, I see the footage. This is just before the cake-cutting ceremony. A pause. Wait. I see something. Let me enhance this section. My heart raced as I waited. Ms. Thorne, she finally said, her voice carefully professional. The footage shows your sister removing something from her clutch and passing it to Mr. Harrington beneath the table. He then appears to conceal it in his palm while approaching the cake. The confirmation should have devastated me. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity. Another piece of evidence. Another nail in their coffin. Can you identify what she handed? Him? Not clearly. It appears to be a small packet or vial. We'll need to enhance the footage further. She paused. Do you know who might have sent you this information? No, I admitted, but I intend to find out. After ending the call, I texted the unknown number. Thank you. The police are reviewing the footage. Who is this? The response came seconds later. Someone who knows what it's like to be erased. More to come. Stay safe. Cryptic, but somehow reassuring. I had an ally I hadn't identified yet. Someone who had been watching more closely than I realized. I spent the remainder of the day in a state of hypervigilance, jumping at every sound in the unfamiliar apartment. By evening, exhaustion had set in, a bone-deep weariness that transcended physical fatigue. I hadn't slept properly in weeks, constantly alert for signs of Elliot's betrayal. Now that it was exposed, my body seemed determined to collect on the sleep debt. A knock at the door startled me from a light doze on the sofa. I approached cautiously, checking the peephole to find a uniformed security guard with a rolling suitcase. Delivery for you, ma'am, he announced after I'd verified his D from Ms. Rodriguez, Mira's last name. The suitcase contained a carefully packed selection of my clothes, toiletries, and personal items, enough to sustain me for at least a week. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, I found my laptop and a manila envelope containing copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. Another knock came just as I was closing the suitcase. This time, it was a different security guard, holding a large paper bag that emitted the tantalizing aroma of hot food. Compliments of Ms. Rodriguez, he said, handing it over. Inside was a container of homemade chicken soup, still warm, and a handwritten note. My grandmother's recipe. She always said it heals what's broken. Try to eat something. I'll pick you. Up at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the interview. The simple kindness nearly broke me. I sat at the kitchen counter, spooning soup I could barely taste through a throat tight with unshed tears, wondering when I would feel like myself again, or if that self was gone forever, replaced by someone harder, warier, forever changed by betrayal. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I hesitated before opening it, then steeled myself. The headline made my spoon clatter against the counter. Exclusive. What police found in newlywed's basement after wedding day drugging. The article was light on confirmed details but heavy on innuendo. Police had reportedly discovered evidence suggesting premeditation in a waterproof container hidden in our basement. The nature of this evidence wasn't specified, but the article quoted an anonymous source claiming it included research on undetectable poisons and a draft obituary. My obituary, written by the man who had vowed to love and cherish me just yesterday. I set the phone down, hands trembling not with fear, but with a cold, clarifying rage. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about greed. This was about erasure, the complete removal of my existence once I had served my purpose as a vessel for transferring wealth. The mystery texter's words echoed in my mind. Someone who knows what it's like to be erased. Who else had they targeted? Who else had seen through their facade and lived to warn others? I opened my laptop and began searching news archives, looking for patterns. Elliot had lived in 3 cities before settling here 5 years ago. I started with the most recent and worked backward, scanning for stories of suspicious deaths, druggings, inheritance disputes. Nothing in the first city, nothing obvious in the second. Then, in articles from 8 years ago, I found it. Local business owner found dead in apparent suicide. Sister inherits estate. The sister's name wasn't Isabel, but the accompanying photo showed a younger Elliot at the funeral, arm around a woman whose face tugged at my memory. I enlarged the image, studying her features. Recognition hit me like a physical blow. Cynthia Maxwell, Elliot's former colleague who had relocated across the country 3 years ago. I'd met her once at a firm event, noted the strange tension between them, the way she'd avoided being alone with him. At the time, I'd assumed it was a soured office romance. Now I saw something else entirely. I picked up my phone and texted the unknown number. Cynthia Maxwell? The response was immediate. Call this number. Encrypted line. With shaking fingers, I dialed. You're quicker than I was, said a familiar voice. Cynthia's voice, though lower and more guarded than I remembered. It took me nearly a year to put it together. Tell me everything, I said. And she did. A sordid tale of partnership, betrayal, and narrowly escaped fate that mirrored my own with chilling precision. Elliot had befriended her brother, become close to the family, eventually suggested a business partnership. When her brother died unexpectedly, Elliot had been a supportive presence in her life, right up until she discovered discrepancies in the toxicology report and evidence of life. Insurance policies she hadn't known about. I couldn't prove it conclusively, she explained. Not enough for criminal charges. But I knew. And he knew I knew. I disappeared, changed my name, started over. Been watching him from afar ever since, waiting for the pattern to repeat. With me, I said quietly. With you. I'm sorry, Maya. I should have warned you somehow. But by the time I realized you were his new target, you were already engaged. You're the one who's been sending the police evidence. Anonymous tips, she confirmed. I've been documenting his activities for years, building a case. Why come forward now? A pause. Because you did what I couldn't. You caught them in the act. You gathered evidence. You're fighting back publicly. Her voice strengthened. And because this time, we can stop them for good. Hope flickered, not for the life I'd lost, but for the justice that might still be possible. Meet me tomorrow, I said. I'm doing an interview with Patricia Chen. Your story needs to be part of it. That's risky for me. Riskier to stay hidden. Together, our testimonies are stronger. Patterns are harder to dismiss than isolated incidents. Silence stretched between us. Then, text me the details. I'll be there. After we disconnected, I sat motionless, absorbing the implications of our conversation. Elliot wasn't just a betraying husband or a money-hungry fraud. He was a practiced predator with at least one potential victim before me. And Isabel, had she been his willing accomplice from the start? Or had he groomed her too, exploited her insecurities and jealousies until she became complicit in his schemes? It didn't matter. Not really. Whatever her motivations, she had made her choices. Just as I was making mine now. I returned to the window, gazing out at the city lights emerging against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Elliot was crafting his defense, spinning narratives, believing himself clever enough to escape consequences yet again. Somewhere, Isabel was recalculating her options, perhaps already seeking a deal to testify against him to save herself. They still thought this was a game they could win. But they had never seen me, really seen me, beyond the accommodating facade I'd presented. They hadn't recognized that my quietness wasn't weakness but observation. My trust wasn't naivete but calculated risk assessment. My patience wasn't passivity but strategic planning. Tomorrow, with Cynthia beside me and Patricia Chen's platform amplifying our voices, they would finally see me clearly. And they would understand, too late, that in targeting me, they had sealed their own fates. I turned from the window and returned to my laptop, opening a fresh document. At the top, I typed, Statement of Maya Thorne, April 27, 2025. Then I began to write, methodically and comprehensively, leaving nothing out. Not a record of victimhood, but a declaration of survival. Not an ending, but a beginning. The woman who had walked down the aisle yesterday no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that trust must be balanced, with vigilance, love with clear-sightedness, hope with pragmatism. Someone who would never again be erased. The morning of the interview dawned with unexpected clarity, both in the crystalline blue sky outside my window and in my mind. I'd slept deeply for the first time in weeks, as if my body recognized that vigilance could finally be shared with others. Somewhere in the night, determination had replaced despair. Purpose had overcome paralysis. Today wasn't about exposing my wounds. It was about ensuring they wouldn't be inflicted on someone else. I dressed with deliberate care, a structured navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Professional, composed, credible. Nothing about my appearance would suggest unstable bride or paranoid wife, the narrative Elliot was working so hard to establish. Mira arrived precisely at 9, dressed similarly in understated business attire. She gave me a quick once-over and nodded approval. Patricia's meeting us at her office downtown, she explained as we rode the elevator down. Cynthia's already there. Arrived at 7 this morning through the service entrance to avoid being seen. Have you vetted her story? I asked. Thoroughly. It checks out. Death certificate for her brother confirms apparent suicide by overdose. Life insurance policy with Elliot as secondary beneficiary after Cynthia. Police reports show she filed suspicious activity claims that were later dropped. Mira's eyes met mine. She's legitimate, Maya, and her testimony corroborates the pattern. The building's private garage connected to a service road that avoided main streets, another security measure I appreciated. As we drove, Mira updated me on developments from the morning news. Elliot's firm has placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. The wedding venue is claiming they had no knowledge of any illegal activity and are cooperating fully with authorities. Social. Media is divided. Some people claiming you're a victim of gaslighting, others suggesting this is an elaborate divorce scheme. I stared out the window, watching the city scroll by. And Isabel? Released on bail this morning. Your parents posted it. My hands clenched involuntarily in my lap. My parents? Mira glanced at me, expression softening slightly. Your mother specifically. Your father wasn't present at the bail hearing. Of course. Despite her promises yesterday, my mother couldn't fully sever the maternal bond with Isabel. Some part of her still believed there must be an explanation, a misunderstanding, anything but the cold truth that one daughter had tried to harm the other. She's under house arrest, Mira continued. Electronic monitoring, no contact order, prohibiting her from reaching out to you or Elliot. Small mercies. At least I wouldn't have to worry about an unexpected confrontation. Patricia Chen's office occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown high-rise, a space that reflected its owner's reputation for precise, uncompromising journalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furnishings, walls lined with award, plaques and framed front pages of her most impactful exposés. Patricia herself was exactly as I remembered from her television appearances. Sharp-eyed, silver-haired, with the focused intensity of someone who had spent decades separating truth from fiction. She greeted me with a firm handshake and direct gaze. Ms. Thorne, thank you for trusting me with your story. No platitudes about being sorry for what I'd experienced. No empty reassurances. Just professional respect and acknowledgement. Cynthia Maxwell sat on a leather sofa against the far wall, almost unrecognizable from the woman I'd briefly met years ago. Her once blonde hair was now a rich auburn, cut in a short, practical style. She'd lost weight, and the confident posture of the successful businesswoman had been replaced by the watchful alertness of someone who had learned the hard way that danger rarely announces itself. Maya, she said simply, rising to greet me. I wish we were meeting again under different circumstances. I wish you'd never had to change your name and disappear, I replied. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Touché. Patricia directed us to a conference room where a camera had been set up for the interview. I'd like to record both of you. Separately first, then together, she explained. Individual testimonies followed by the connection between your experiences. More powerful that way. She turned to me. Before we begin, I want to be clear about something. This isn't a tabloid piece about a wedding gone wrong. This is investigative journalism about predatory behavior, financial exploitation, and attempted murder. I don't deal in sensationalism or easy narratives. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny and disclosure? I wouldn't be here otherwise, I said. She nodded once, satisfied. Then let's begin with you, Ms. Thorne. Start from the moment. You first suspected something wasn't right. For the next 2 hours, I walked through my story chronologically, Patricia interrupting only for clarification or supporting details. She requested documentation for each claim, the text messages, the bank records, the recording from the reception, the lab results from the cake sample. She treated my account with neither skepticism nor blind acceptance, but with methodical verification. When did you decide to go through with the wedding despite your suspicions? She asked. The moment I understood this wasn't just about an affair or money, I explained. When I found evidence of the life insurance policy and realized my death was part of their plan, I knew I needed irrefutable proof. A canceled wedding would have just delayed their attempt, driven it underground, made it harder to document. Patricia nodded. Some might call that reckless. I call it strategic, I countered. I had safeguards in place. The wedding was controlled environment with witnesses, medical personnel on site, security cameras. I needed them to act where they could be caught. And you were confident enough in your observations to risk ingesting whatever they planned to give you? I was confident enough in my observations to ensure I wouldn't have to. Her lips curved slightly, the closest thing to approval I'd seen from her. Ms. Maxwell, she said, turning to Cynthia, would you share your experience now? Cynthia's story emerged like a dark mirror of my own. Elliot insinuating himself into her family, befriending her brother Daniel, becoming an indispensable business partner and confidant. After Daniel's suicide, Elliot had been devastatingly supportive, helping with funeral arrangements, taking over business operations temporarily, even accompanying Cynthia to grief counseling sessions. I was vulnerable, she admitted. Overwhelmed with grief and sudden responsibility, Elliot became my rock, my sounding board, eventually, my lover. She described how the relationship had progressed rapidly toward engagement, until she discovered discrepancies in her brother's toxicology report while organizing his medical records. The levels of sedatives in his system were inconsistent with suicide, she explained. Daniel had been clean for years after a brief addiction in college, and he'd just secured major funding for his tech startup. Everything was going well. There was no trigger, no note, nothing to suggest he'd relapse or take his own life. When she'd begun investigating privately, she discovered the life insurance policy naming first her, then Elliot as beneficiaries. A policy her brother had supposedly taken out just months before his death. The signature looked wrong, she said. Daniel had distinctive handwriting from a childhood injury. This was close, but not quite right. I hired a handwriting expert who confirmed it was forged. But before she could take her evidence to the police, she'd found her own home infiltrated, computer files corrupted, papers missing, and Elliot's behavior had shifted subtly. Questions about her mental health inserted casually into conversations, suggestions that grief was affecting her judgment, that perhaps she needed more intensive therapy. I recognized the gaslighting, she said. My grandmother had suffered elder abuse from a caregiver who used the same tactics. So, instead of confronting him, I prepared to disappear. Liquidated assets he didn't know about, created a new identity, and left town while he was at a conference. And you've been monitoring him since? Patricia asked. Cynthia nodded. From a safe distance. I built a secure life elsewhere, but I kept track of his movements, his relationships. I was gathering evidence, building a case strong enough that he couldn't manipulate his way out of it. Which led you to Maya. Yes. When I saw his engagement announcement in the business press, I recognized the pattern immediately. Successful woman, substantial assets, prominent family connections. I tried to find a way to warn her, but he was careful. They never attended events where I might have approached her safely. She turned to me, regret evident in her expression. I should have tried harder, found a way. You're here now, I said simply. That's what matters. Patricia directed her next question. To both of us. Did either of you notice Elliot's connection to Isabel Thorne before the wedding? I exchanged glances with Cynthia. I knew they were friendly, I admitted. Elliot encouraged me to make her my maid of honor, said it would help heal our competitive relationship. In retrospect, he was positioning her closer to us, creating opportunities for their affair. Did you ever suspect they knew each other before you introduced them? Patricia pressed. The question caught me off guard. No. Why? After we disconnected, I sat with this new information, turning it over in my mind. Justice was unfolding, more quickly than I'd anticipated, the carefully constructed facades of both Elliot and Isabel crumbling under scrutiny. But justice wasn't the same as healing. The legal system could impose consequences, but it couldn't restore trust or mend the familial bonds that had been severed. That work would be mine alone. My laptop chimed with an incoming email from Patricia Chen, the draft of tomorrow's article for my review. The headline was stark in its simplicity. The Perfect Prey: How a Serial Predator Targeted Wealthy Women. Through Marriage and Murder. Beneath it, a subheading: Survivors Speak Out, the Women Who Escaped Elliot Harrington's Deadly Pattern. Survivors, not victims. The distinction mattered. I began reading the article, my own experience rendered in clear, factual prose alongside Cynthia's. The pattern undeniable when presented together. Patricia had done her research thoroughly, uncovering financial records, travel patterns, connections, between cases that even I hadn't fully pieced together. At the article's conclusion, she'd included a statement from me that we'd crafted together at the end of the interview. I'm sharing my story not for sympathy or sensation, but as a warning and a promise. A warning that predators like Elliot Harrington exist and operate in plain sight, using trust as a weapon and intimacy as a shield. And a promise that survival is possible, that vigilance, evidence, and courage can disrupt even the most carefully orchestrated betrayal. Today I stand not as a victim of attempted murder, but as a witness to the power of truth. Reading those words, my words, I felt something shift inside me. The raw wound of betrayal didn't disappear, but it changed shape, transformed from a debilitating injury into a source of hard-won wisdom. I had been marked by this experience, but not defined by it. I would carry these scars, but they would not determine my path forward. Tomorrow, when this story broke, I would face public scrutiny, disbelief, judgment. But I would also find allies, supporters, perhaps even others who recognized Elliot's tactics from their own experiences. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows in a cleansing rhythm. I pressed my palm to the cool glass, feeling the vibration of each droplet, nature's reminder that storms pass, that water cleanses, that even the darkest clouds eventually part. I had survived my wedding day. I would survive this too, and emerge, not just intact, but transformed. A woman who understood her own strength because she had been forced to test it. A woman who recognized manipulation because she had witnessed its most extreme form. A woman who valued truth above comfort, evidence above assumption, and her own intuition above all. In attempting to erase me, Elliot and Isabel had instead crystallized who I truly was. The final irony of their failed plan, in trying to destroy me, they had made me indestructible. The day Patricia Chen's article was published, I watched the world react from the sanctuary of the secure apartment. My phone buzzed incessantly until Mira suggested I turn it off entirely. "Let the storm rage without you for a day," she advised. "You've earned that much." So I did. I disconnected from calls, texts, news alerts, social media, and simply breathed. For 6 hours, I existed in a bubble of quiet while outside. My story and Cynthia's rippled across the digital landscape, creating waves that would eventually reach shores I couldn't yet imagine. When I finally reconnected at sunset, the magnitude of the response overwhelmed me. Hundreds of messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers. Media requests from national networks. A statement of support from my company's board of directors. And most surprisingly, a formal press release from Elliot's law firm announcing his permanent termination and the establishment of a client protection fund for anyone who might have been harmed by his actions. The photograph of Cynthia and me that accompanied Patricia's article had already become iconic. 2 women standing shoulder to shoulder, gazes direct and unflinching. Not broken victims, but resolute witnesses. Someone had created a social media filter based on the image with the caption, "Believe your instincts." It had been shared thousands of times already. But amid the public reaction, one message stood out. A simple text from my father. "Your grandmother would be so proud of your courage. And so am I." No mention of my mother or Isabel. No platitudes about healing or moving forward. Just recognition of the strength it had taken to expose the truth, regardless of the personal cost. I was still holding my phone, rereading his message, when Mira returned with dinner and news. "The DA called," she said without preamble. "Elliot's trying to negotiate a plea deal. They're not biting yet, but wanted you to know." "And Isabel?" "Accepted into the witness protection program in exchange for her full testimony." Mira set the takeout containers on the kitchen counter. "She'll serve time. Reduced sentence, but not insignificant. Then a new identity, new location. Erasure, a fitting consequence for someone who had tried to erase me. Yet I felt no satisfaction at the thought of my sister disappearing into the witness protection program, becoming someone else, somewhere else. Just a hollow certainty that justice, however imperfect, was proceeding. "There's something else," Mira added, sliding a manila envelope across the counter. "From Cynthia. She asked me to deliver it personally." Inside was a single sheet of paper, a list of 5 names, each with a date and location beside it. At the bottom, a handwritten note. These women all had connections to Elliot before their accidents or sudden illnesses. "I've been tracking them for years but couldn't confirm the pattern alone. With your testimony establishing his methods, we can help them now. Call me when you're ready. 5 more potential victims. 5 more lives interrupted or ended by the man who had vowed to love and cherish me." The scope of his predation expanded again. A dark universe with more galaxies than I had imagined. I called Cynthia immediately. "You've seen the list," she said instead of greeting. "Yes. Are you certain about these connections? As certain as I can be without official investigation. Each woman was wealthy or about to come into significant assets. Each had a relationship with Elliot that conveniently positioned him to benefit from their incapacitation or death. Each case was ruled accident, natural causes, or remains unsolved. I studied the list again. The earliest date was 9 years ago, a college girlfriend who'd drowned during a weekend getaway, leaving Elliot as the beneficiary of a trust fund that had just matured. The most recent was only 14 months ago, a business associate who'd survived a mysterious poisoning but suffered permanent cognitive impairment, with Elliot serving as her financial conservator until his recent arrest. "What are you proposing?" I asked. "A foundation," Cynthia replied without hesitation, "dedicated to investigating and supporting victims of this specific type of predation. Financial resources for families seeking to reopen cases, legal assistance for voiding fraudulent, financial arrangements, medical support for survivors of poisoning attempts." The vision was so clear, so aligned with my own emerging sense of purpose, that I felt my pulse quicken. "I've been thinking about something similar," I admitted. "Using my legal background and biotech connections to create a specialized task force. Forensic accountants, toxicologists, investigators, experts who understand these intersecting methods of exploitation." "Exactly." The excitement in Cynthia's voice matched my own. "We could call it the Phoenix Initiative," I suggested, "for those rising from the ashes of attempted erasure." A moment of silence then. "Perfect. When can we meet to discuss next steps?" We arranged to connect the following day, not at Patricia's office or the secure apartment, but at a private conference room in my company's building. It was time to emerge from hiding, to step back into my professional identity and the power it afforded me. After the call ended, I stood at the window watching city lights flicker against the darkening sky. For the first time since discovering Elliot's betrayal, I felt something beyond survival or justice-seeking. I felt purpose, a clear path forward that would transform personal trauma into collective action. The sensation was so foreign after weeks of hypervigilance and reactive planning that I almost didn't recognize it. Hope. Not for restoration of what was lost, but for creation of something entirely new. Morning brought another wave of media. Attention as Patricia Chen's follow-up piece hit the digital presses. A deeper investigation into Elliot's pattern, including interviews with family members of 2 women from Cynthia's list. The story had evolved from shocking individual betrayal to systematic predation, with financial, legal, and medical implications that transcended sensationalism. I dressed carefully for my first public appearance since the wedding, a structured black suit, subtle jewelry, hair pulled back in a simple style that conveyed professionalism rather than victimhood. The media would be watching, analyzing, interpreting. Every visual cue mattered. Detective Mendez had arranged a police escort to my company headquarters, not because of any specific threat, but because the case had attracted so much attention that my safety couldn't be guaranteed otherwise. As we drove through downtown, I glimpsed news vans already stationed outside the building. Word of my return to work had leaked somehow. "We'll take you through the private entrance," Mendez assured me from the front passenger seat. "Security team is already in position." I nodded, grateful for her efficiency, but determined not to appear intimidated or in hiding. "I'll need to make a brief statement to the press at some point. Better to address them directly than have them speculate." Mendez gave me an appraising look. "Most people in your position would avoid the cameras entirely." "I'm not most people," I replied, "and hiding suggests shame or fear. I have neither." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Clearly, we'll arrange something controlled this afternoon. 3 minutes, pre-screened questions only." The underground. Parking garage connected directly to a private elevator that whisked me to the executive floor without passing through public areas. As the doors opened, I was greeted by a sight that momentarily stole my breath. The entire executive team and board of directors standing in the reception area, faces solemn but supportive. Dr. Amara Okafor, our CEO and my mentor since graduate school, stepped forward first. "Maya," she said simply, enfolding me in a brief, fierce hug before stepping back to appropriate professional distance. "Welcome back." "Thank you for the company's statement of support," I said, addressing the group. "It meant more than you." "No." "It was the absolute minimum response to an unconscionable situation," replied Martin Chen, our chief legal officer. "Your office is exactly as you left it, and your projects have been maintained in your absence. Whenever you're ready to resume your duties, we're prepared to support that transition." The normality of it, the mundane, wonderful normality of discussing work schedules and project timelines, nearly undid me. Here was a realm where my competence remained unquestioned, my value undiminished by recent events. Here, I was still Dr. Maya Thorne, brilliant patent attorney and biotech innovator, not just the bride whose husband tried to poison her. "I'd like to ease back in," I said, finding my professional voice again. "Starting with the conference room I've reserved for a meeting this morning." Dr. Okafor nodded. "Of course, and Maya." She hesitated, uncharacteristic for such a decisive woman. "If there's anything the company can do, any resources we can provide for your recovery or for pursuing justice—" "Actually," I interrupted gently, "there is. But it's not just for me." I outlined the concept for the Phoenix Initiative, watching interest spark in her eyes as she recognized both the humanitarian value and the potential for positive association with our company's brand. "A foundation focused on investigating and supporting victims of similar crimes," I concluded, using our expertise in biotech and legal spheres to create meaningful change. "Send me the proposal," she said immediately. "I'll present it to the board this afternoon. We could provide initial funding, laboratory access, legal support, and legitimacy," I added. "Institutional backing that would make it harder for these cases to be dismissed as isolated incidents or personal vendettas." Our conversation was interrupted by my assistant Layla's appearance at the reception desk, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to visible emotion when she saw me. "Dr. Thorne," she managed, blinking rapidly. "Your visitor has arrived. She's waiting in conference room C. Cynthia, right on time." "Thank you, Layla. Please show her to my office in 15 minutes. We'll conduct our meeting there instead." As the executives dispersed back to their duties, Dr. Okafor lingered a moment longer. "Maya," she said quietly, "what you're doing, transforming a personal tragedy into systemic change, it's remarkable. But don't forget to heal yourself in the process." I nodded, acknowledging her concern without promising what I wasn't sure I could deliver. Healing seemed abstract, distant, a luxury I hadn't yet given myself permission to pursue while justice remained incomplete. My office was indeed exactly as I'd left it the day before my wedding. Papers arranged in precise stacks, plant still, thriving by the window, Layla's doing, surely, family photo on the desk. I stopped, hand suspended in air. The photo. My parents, Isabel and me at my doctoral graduation 6 years ago. All smiles, arms linked, the picture of familial harmony. With deliberate care, I turned the frame face down. Not erasing the past, but acknowledging its fundamental alteration. Some symbols could not remain unchanged after truth emerged. Cynthia arrived precisely on schedule, transformed from the wary, hypervigilant woman I'd first reconnected with into someone radiating purposeful energy. She carried a sleek laptop and several thick folders, dressed in a tailored navy suit that matched my own professional armor. "You look different," she observed after Layla had shown her in and closed the door behind her. "So do you," I replied. "Less hunted." She nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. It's the first time in years I haven't looked over my shoulder. Every 5 minutes, Remarkable what public exposure of the truth can do for one's posture. We settled at the small conference table in the corner of my office, spreading materials between us. Her research files, my legal notes, printouts of foundation structures and nonprofit models that might serve as templates for what we envisioned. "I've been thinking about scope," I began. "We need to define our mission narrowly enough to be effective, but broadly enough to encompass the different facets of these crimes." "Agreed." "I've identified 3 essential components: forensic reinvestigation of suspicious deaths or incapacitations, financial restoration for victims or their families, and medical research into detection of the substances typically used in these cases." For the next 2 hours, we outlined a framework that grew more solid with each passing minute, a foundation that would combine Cynthia's investigative expertise with my legal and scientific connections, creating a resource unlike any that currently existed. We were so absorbed in our planning that we barely registered the knock at my office door until it opened to reveal Detective Mendez. "Pardon the interruption," she said, eyes taking in our work-covered table. "But there's been a significant development in the case." My pulse quickened. "Elliot," she nodded. "He's agreed to a full confession in exchange for certain considerations. The DA wanted you both to know before it becomes public." Cynthia and I exchanged glances. "What kind of confession?" Cynthia asked, voice carefully controlled. "Comprehensive. He's admitting to conspiracy charges in your case," Mendez said. "Looking at me, as well as involvement in the deaths of 3 individuals, including Daniel Maxwell." Her eyes shifted to Cynthia, who had gone utterly still. "He's also providing information about 4 additional attempted poisonings over the past decade." The confirmation of what we had suspected, of what Cynthia had been tracking for years without official validation, landed like a physical blow. 3 deaths, 4 additional victims, a pattern so extensive it could only be described as serial predation. "What considerations is he receiving in return?" I asked, the attorney in me automatically assessing the deal. "No death penalty, in the jurisdictions where that's applicable. Consolidated sentencing, certain privileges regarding facility assignment." Mendez's expression remained neutral. "The DA believes the trade-off is worth it. Closure for multiple families, justice for victims who might otherwise never see their cases solved." Cynthia's hands had clenched into fists on the table. "When will this be announced?" "Press conference scheduled for 5 this afternoon. You'll both be notified beforehand with more details of his statement." Mendez hesitated. "There's one more thing. He's specifically requested to make a direct statement to each of you as part of the agreement." "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "Out of the question," Cynthia echoed. Mendez nodded, unsurprised. "The DA anticipated your response and has already declined that condition. I wanted you to be aware it was requested." After she departed, Cynthia and I sat in charged silence, the weight of confirmation settling around us like invisible dust. "He wanted to see our faces," Cynthia finally said. "One last time. To what? Apologize? Justify? Gloat?" "To maintain the illusion of control," I replied. "Even in confession, he's trying to dictate terms, create narratives, position himself at the center." She laughed without humor. "God, you're right. It's pathological." "And transparent, once you recognize the pattern." I gestured to our work spread across the table. "Which is exactly why this foundation matters, teaching others to see what we didn't see until it was almost too late." By late afternoon, news of Elliot's confession had broken, sending another shockwave through media outlets already saturated with our story. The press conference revealed details even I hadn't known: the sophisticated planning behind each crime, the careful selection of victims based on financial profiles and isolation factors, the escalating boldness as he refined his methods, Isabel featured prominently in his confession regarding my case, but he characterized her as a willing accomplice rather than a manipulated pawn. According to Elliot, she had approached him after their initial meeting at the legal conference, suggesting I would make an ideal target given my inheritance and company shares. Their relationship had developed alongside the conspiracy, each reinforcing the other in a toxic symbiosis. I watched the press conference from my office, Cynthia beside me, both of us silent as the DA outlined the charges, the evidence, the expected sentencing. When it concluded, she turned to me with eyes that had witnessed too much but remained unbowed. "So now we know," she said simply. "All of it." "Not quite all," I corrected. "We'll never fully understand the why. What fundamental brokenness allows someone to calculate human lives as merely obstacles to wealth? Does the why matter in the end? The pattern is what matters. Recognizing it, interrupting it, preventing it from claiming more victims." She was right, of course. Understanding Elliot's psychology might satisfy curiosity, but identifying his methods would save lives. That was the purpose that had crystallized from my personal devastation. Not healing alone, but protection. Not just recovery, but prevention. The media statement I delivered that afternoon reflected this evolution in my thinking. Standing before cameras in the company's press room, I spoke not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a professional launching an initiative. The Phoenix Initiative will combine forensic reinvestigation, financial recovery services, and medical research to address a specific type of predation that has gone largely unrecognized, I explained, voice steady. These crimes exist at the intersection of intimate betrayal, financial exploitation, and medical assault. They prey on trust and use relationship as both weapon and shield. I outlined the Foundation's three-pronged approach, acknowledging Cynthia's partnership and my company's support, inviting other corporations and institutions to join our effort. No mention of personal pain or emotional impact. Those belonged to me alone, not to public consumption. As cameras flashed and reporters called questions, I felt an unexpected sense of alignment, as if the different facets of myself that had fractured on my wedding day were finally finding new arrangement. Not healed, not yet, but purposefully reconfigured. Later that evening, as Mira drove me back to the secure apartment one last time, I would be moving to a new permanent residence the following day. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We've never met, but I was with Daniel when he died. I've been afraid to come forward until now. Your foundation gives me hope that the truth matters. Please contact me. Another witness. Another piece of the puzzle Elliot thought he had destroyed." I forwarded the message to both Cynthia and Detective Mendez, then leaned back against the headrest, watching the city scroll past outside the car window. Each streetlight we passed marked another second, carrying me further from the woman who had walked down the aisle 4 days ago and closer to the woman I was becoming. Someone forged in betrayal but not defined by it. My phone buzzed again. A message from Patricia Chen. "Following your press conference, 3 more potential victims have contacted me. The pattern is larger than any of us realized. When can we talk?" 3 more. The number shouldn't have shocked me, yet it did. The sheer scale of Elliot's predation expanding like dark matter in the universe, invisible until you knew exactly how to look for it. I texted back, "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring them to the Phoenix offices." We didn't have official Phoenix offices yet, just the conference room my company had allocated for our use, but naming it made it real. Claiming the space, the mission, the future unfolding before me with unexpected clarity. Mira glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But it will be. Not the same kind of okay I expected a week ago, but a different kind. Maybe a better kind." She nodded, understanding without requiring elaboration. "New normal." "New purpose," I corrected. At the apartment, I packed the few belongings I'd accumulated during my brief stay: clothes, toiletries, the notebook, where I'd sketched early ideas for the foundation. So little to show for such a transformative period in my life. No physical evidence of the seismic shifts that had occurred within me. As I zipped the small suitcase, my phone rang, my father's. Number on the screen. "Maya," he said when I answered, his voice rough with emotion. "I've been watching the news, the foundation you're creating. It's extraordinary." "Thank you," I replied, uncertain what else to say. We were navigating uncharted territory in our relationship, the familiar rhythms of father-daughter interaction, disrupted by his other daughter's betrayal. "I want to help," he continued. "Not just financially, though I'm prepared to make a significant donation, but with my connections in medical research. There are laboratories working on advanced toxicology, screenings that could partner with your initiative." The offer surprised me, not his generosity, which had always been abundant, but his immediate practical focus. No dwelling on family tragedy, no lamenting what was lost, just forward movement toward solutions. "That would be invaluable," I said, sincerely. "We're assembling partners now for the research component." "Good. I'll send the contacts tomorrow." He paused. "Maya, your mother. She's struggling. With everything. But especially with your press conference today." I tensed, bracing for criticism or pleas for compassion toward Isabel. "I didn't mention Isabel specifically. It's not that. It's seeing you so composed, so focused on helping others when she knows how deeply you must be hurting." His voice softened. "She's ashamed, Maya. Ashamed that she never saw what was happening, that she posted bail for Isabel, that she's torn between her daughters, even knowing what one did to the other." The admission caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness or rationalization, not recognition of the impossible position my mother now occupied. "I don't hate her," I said finally. "I understand the maternal instinct to protect, even when protection isn't deserved. But I need time, Dad. Time to figure out what family means now, what relationships are possible after this kind of betrayal." "Of course," he said quickly. "No pressure. Just don't close the door entirely. She loves you, Maya. Imperfectly, inconsistently sometimes, but genuinely." After we disconnected, I sat on the edge of the bed, turning his words over in my mind. The possibility of reconciliation with my mother seemed distant, abstract, a future consideration for a time when justice had been fully served and new foundations built. Yet his call had revealed something important. I wasn't the only one transformed by recent events. My father, too, was evolving, stepping forward with practical support, engaging directly rather than retreating from painful realities. Perhaps crisis revealed authentic character not just in those directly targeted, but in everyone within its blast radius. Morning arrived with a clarity that matched my resolute mood. Today marked 1 week since my wedding day, a milestone that should have found me on a Mediterranean honeymoon, not preparing to launch a foundation born from betrayal. But as I dressed in a deep green suit that symbolized growth rather than mourning, I recognized that the path before me, though unexpected and difficult, offered possibilities the other never could. The woman who had nearly married Elliot Harrington would have lived a comfortable life of achieved ambitions and social recognition, never knowing the predator beside her until it was too late. This woman, the one who had switched cake slices and survived, would build something that transcended personal success, something that would protect others, create justice, transform individual trauma into collective strength. I checked my appearance one final time before leaving the apartment. Notes of silver in my jewelry, hair styled with deliberate confidence, expression composed but not hardened. The image reflected in the mirror was neither victim nor avenger, but architect, someone designing a new structure from the ruins of what had fallen. Outside, the day was brilliantly clear, spring sunshine illuminating the city with uncompromising brightness, No shadows to hide in, no clouds to obscure. Just light, revealing everything as it truly was. As I stepped into the waiting car that would take me to the first official meeting of the Phoenix Initiative, I felt something I hadn't experienced since discovering Elliot's betrayal. Anticipation. Not anxiety or dread, but genuine eagerness. To begin the day's work, to meet with Cynthia and Patricia Chen, to hear from new witnesses, to lay foundations that would support others emerging from similar darkness. The phoenix rises not because the fire never happened, but because it refuses to be the fire's final word. In surviving what was meant to destroy me, I had discovered capacities for vigilance, strategic thinking, and resilience I might never have known otherwise. In losing the future I had planned, I had gained the opportunity to create one with greater purpose and wider impact. The betrayal would always be part of my story. The switched cake slices, the collapsed sister, the unraveling conspiracy, these events had altered the trajectory of my life irrevocably. But they would not be the most important chapters in that story, merely the catalyst for what came next. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back once at the apartment building that had sheltered me during my most vulnerable days. A temporary refuge, necessary but impermanent. The road ahead would not be easy, justice rarely followed. A straight line, healing never proceeded on a predictable timeline, and building something new required sustained effort through uncertainty. But I was ready. Ready to transform private pain into public purpose. Ready to use specialized knowledge to protect vulnerable others. Ready to demonstrate that survival was not just possible but powerful. The Phoenix Initiative would become my legacy, not the one I had anticipated, but perhaps the one I was always meant to create. From ashes not of my making would rise something entirely new, something that would shine light into shadows where predators like Elliot operated, something that would give voice to those who had been silenced, something that would ensure that my sister's attempt to drug my wedding cake became not an ending, but a beginning, the first paragraph in a story of transformation, justice, and unexpected purpose. The car turned a corner, sunlight streaming through the window to warm my face. I closed my eyes briefly, allowing myself to feel both the weight of what had happened and the potential of what lay ahead. Both were true. Both were mine to carry, to transform, to direct toward purpose. I opened my eyes, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to step into the first day of this new life, not as bride or victim or survivor alone, but as creator of something that would outlast the pain that birthed it. The phoenix rises, and so would I. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.